Hi and welcome to another episode of Lessons I Learned in Law, the podcast that brings you the real stories from the people who've made it into some of the biggest and most aspirational in-house legal positions globally. I'm your host, Scott Brown. I am founder of Heriot Brown In-House Legal Recruitment, the business that powers this show, and I'm also a former corporate lawyer. On each episode, I hope to bring you unfiltered conversations with someone in a leadership position in-house. And these will give you an insight into some of the unscripted and honest chats that I have on a daily and weekly basis with some of the people in key executive leadership roles about what it really takes to help them build successful and fulfilling careers and teams in-house. We're going to be talking about strategic partnerships with business leaders, how you can have legal having a seat at the table function in the executive committee, and the key people and the moments that shaped each of our guest career paths, which is the most important thing for me. So this is where we're going to go beyond the CV and we're going to look at what it really takes to get into those positions, some of the luck that these people have had along the way and how they've made that and engineered that luck, and really what makes these fantastic leaders tick. So this sounds like something for you. Let's get into it. Hi, welcome to Lessons I Learned in Law. On the show this week, I'm joined by Jane Hyde. Now, Jane is Group General Counsel and Company Secretary at RWS Group PLC, where she sits on the Execo, has dual reporting into both the CEO in that company and the chairman as well, where she has responsibility as the company secretary. Now, what was amazingly interesting in this podcast is the career path that Jane's had to get her into that position. If you are risk averse and you think every move has to be pre-planned and you're on a growth journey or a particular trajectory, then listen to this. It might get you to change your mind. Jane started out as a corporate lawyer at Freshfields, and then she transitioned into something which is like a lot of lawyers that we speak to would love to do. She moved into banking, and she worked at JP Morgan at front office for a number of years before moving into a compliance role within a Japanese bank at Nomura, and then she had a career break, worked as in a PSL role to get back into law, and then has been in-house ever since and hasn't looked back and taken on this executive leadership position at RWS over the past few years. So some amazing stuff in there, really inspirational. We also chat about her side hustle that she had during her sabbatical, looking at wine tasting and getting involved in that world. So loads of interesting stuff in there, a really interesting character, and I hope you enjoy. So let's dive in. Thanks for joining me, Jane.
My pleasure.
Nice of you to join us. It's a first time in this studio, and understand a first podcast experience for yourself.
My first podcast, yeah.
Nice, good. Well, I'll go easy on you. We've also got a first. We've got a makeshift sound engineer today, helping us with Ben from our team. So we'll see how that goes. Exactly. Cool. Well, I've given my best shot at giving an introduction to yourself, but it'd be great to just tend to start with an overview of your position at the moment, and then we'll crack on and get a little bit of an understanding about what got you there.
So I am currently the General Counsel and Company Secretary at RWS Holdings PLC. We are an AIM-listed company, about $500 million market cap. And my role is I'm part of the executive team, and I obviously report to the CEO. But I also work very closely with the board. So in the role of COSEC, so I do all the governance side. The legal team reports into me, privacy team, and I'm also responsible for risk management in the business.
Cool. Nice. How big's the function, legal function?
So our team is currently, we're about 16 people, I think, all in, with everyone. Yeah. We've got a couple of roles that we're recruiting for at the moment. So It's a really interesting time to join our business actually, because I think with the whole focus on kind of AI, because of what we do, so RWS people probably don't know very much about, but it's
tell us a bit about that.
It's a company that provides. So what our strapline is unlocking global understanding, and it's a company which provides tech-enabled language, content management, and IP solutions.
Okay.
To large-scale enterprise clients.
Okay.
So a lot of it's really sort of managing data, huge pools of data, and localizing that, so kind of translating it.
Right.
So that customers can, localize the product across the world.
Okay.
So if they're launching a marketing campaign, or they have, so we work for a lot of the pharma companies, if they, they're regulated products, that they can market them around the world safely and securely. We work with the kind of magic circle law firms.
Right.
So it's a really interesting business. And I think particularly because with the whole, we've been doing AI for 20 years.
Yeah, because the business was it's like 1958 or something.
Yes, originally, yes. So it was originally kind of more in the sort of the IP space, but actually it's branched out and grown quite significantly through acquisition. And we've acquired a lot of technology along the way, and a lot of that is machine translation. So, and it's neural machine translation. So kind of AI, we've been in the whole AI world for quite a long time. So now it's a boom thing.
Yeah, I know. It's on everyone's
buzzword.
lips.
It's kind of like, okay, we're part of the zeitgeist. So,
oh, nice. Leading the charge. You can't move for it. You can't move for the people talking about AI at the moment. It's very much dictating all industries. So yeah, keen to hear a bit more about that. And AIM listed, is that is this the first AIM listed company you've worked
It is actually. So my career really has been more on the kind of the main market sort of focused companies, certainly as an advisor, but also kind of in-house as well. But I mean, we, in terms of governance, I mean, we try and run ourselves as we would if we were a FTSE 250, because that's sort of the equivalent. And that's kind of what both our customers and our investors expect as well. So it's not a sort of lower down, lower tier kind of governance. Yeah.
And what's been the main change, I guess, like in feel of working main market? And
I mean, there's a bit more flexibility, I suppose, certainly in terms of some of the governance and, say, remuneration type decisions. I think, so we grew very quickly as an organization. So I think, for example, my role was a new role. So there wasn't a general counsel and company secretary when I joined. So I've actually had to sort of build up quite a lot of the function.
Nice.
And, as I say, as we've grown through acquisition, you need to then integrate. So we've been, part of my role has been to kind of really try and embed some of those systems and controls and the sorts of things you'd expect to see in a listed environment.
Yeah. Nice. All right. We'll jump into lesson 1, if you could share that, please.
So my first lesson is actually, I think you learn most about being a good lawyer through the things you do in your career, which when you're not a lawyer.
Right.
So I think actually, certainly as a general counsel or working in-house, you need to understand the context when you're giving advice. You can't sit in an ivory tower kind of away from the business. You need to have a real understanding of the strategy. You need to have at least a basic understanding of finance. You need to, if you're listed, you need to understand the dynamics of the market. And I think it's all those things which make you a really good risk advisor, because I think you can't give advice unless you understand the context.
Yeah.
And so I've had quite a non-linear career. So I started out as a lawyer and I went into banking. When I was in banking for 10 years, I wasn't a lawyer for quite a large part of my career.
All right. And outside of, so you were in the banking space?
Front office.
Okay.
So I moved, so I was with JP Morgan Casino for 6 years. And so I moved into a corporate finance role, which was quite, I didn't realize at the time, one of the things you take those decisions, you don't realize quite how big the leap is. So moving from kind of words to numbers is kind of quite, even though you're doing the same transactions, it was quite a big leap.
Yeah.
And just a completely different environment and pace. So moving from a law firm, just in the sort of the hierarchy of a law firm to then going into banking, and the expectations are very different.
So you qualified into M&E corporate?
Yes, so I was originally at Freshfields,
Mhm.
and I qualified in their corporate finance, one of
Right.
the corporate finance teams. So I was, I love the kind of public company work, the kind of M&As of takeovers and capital markets work,
Mhm.
and listings, kind of rights issues, etc., all that stuff. I really love the kind of, it's in the FT. It's kind of
Yeah.
you're reading about the deals, and I found that quite, that was what I really enjoyed.
Uh-huh.
But it got to the point where actually I kind of felt like, as the lawyer, sometimes you're a bit, certainly in private practice, you might be kind of at the bottom of the food chain in terms of knowing what's actually going on.
When it's happening.
What are the drivers? Why are people doing this? What, and then sort of you showing up to meetings with the corporate brokers and the bankers and the kind of, the PR people. And it's, that you kind of only see a small part of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of, I wanted to be a bit closer to the markets.
Right. So what stage was that then? How?
So I was about 3 years qualified.
Right.
I moved across.
Okay.
And yeah, it was just a brilliant experience. So I joined Cazenave, which then became JP Morgan Cazenave.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was quite a steep learning curve,
Yeah.
I had to say, because I'd done maths A level, but I hadn't done numbers for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it was a real kind of switch.
And how did it come about? How did that happen?
Someone that I work with at Freshfields introduced me to someone that they'd recently been working with at Cazenave, because they knew that it was a friend of mine at work had sort of introduced me. That she knew I was interested in moving into banking.
Okay, nice.
And made the introduction.
Yeah.
And they kind of took a leap of faith, I suppose.
Okay.
So I wasn't necessarily the typical person that they were looking to hire. Because you're kind of looking for someone with more of a finance background.
Right. And because we speak to so many, or I was a lawyer myself, but speak to a lot of people who think the grass is greener. Something else, where they're looking at bankers or that sort of world, and perhaps thinking that it's the something they missed out on by becoming a lawyer. Like, what were your initial impressions? Was the switch more fulfilling?
There was definitely much more of a requirement to take accountability, to actually make things happen. You were judged much more quickly in terms of whether something was good or whether something was not very good.
Right.
Sitting in the open plan, everything's quite public, good or bad. There's a lot more buzz, I suppose.
Yeah.
The kind of the interactions that you have with your clients is slightly different. The expectations, the kind of support that your clients want. It was just a very different environment, and it did take me quite a long time.
Right.
So having been a lawyer, so I did law at university and then going into private practice, and there's that kind of way of thinking in that environment as a lawyer. So it was just, as I say, I had kind of I just didn't realize how big a leap it would be.
Right.
But
what's your day-to-day like in that type of environment? What is the day-to-day?
So I was working in the transactions team. So I was doing the same kind of M&A deals, public deals.
Like origination of deals?
So originally I was in the transactions, so I wasn't originating to start with. But then eventually, after a few years, I moved into one of the sector teams.
Right.
That was more on the corporate broking side. So that is being the interface between your client and the market. So clients ring you up saying, what's happened to my share price? Why is my share price down? You need to have an answer.
Right.
So you need to go down to the trading floor and find out what's going on, and then sound credible when you come back.
Right.
So there was obviously the kind of the general cadence of investor relations and results presentations, and kind of guiding you're basically guiding your client on how the market will react to either a set of results or a strategic transaction that they're launching, or you're just sort of giving them feedback about how the market might perceive a perceived change of strategy, that sort of thing.
Yeah, nice. So back to the lesson, you sort of mentioned how that has you've learned and taken so much from that experience of not working as a lawyer. Like, what are the key things, and where did you learn them that you think stand you in good stead for being the general counsel that you are today?
I think it's not everything is important. I mean, clearly you're the lawyer in the room, so you need to have done all the research. You need to look into everything. But there is an assessment about risk management, and I think spending that time kind of in a front office environment, or it doesn't have to be that, but you could go on to comment, or you could even just having a regular catch up with one of your business colleagues. You just need to understand what the drivers are. Because if you're the risk manager, which essentially you are as the GC, you can only make those sorts of assessment and give your advice about, actually, don't worry about that. That's not a big deal. That not every legal issue is going to result in a multi-million-pound claim, or a regulatory investigation, or there are some things which are kind of, in theory, this could happen, but it's not going to. Or actually, do you know what? We need to take a view on that, because actually the strategic goal is more important. So it's those judgment calls. I think that sort of context enables you to really be effective in giving advice.
So like junior or mid-level lawyers that want to absorb that type of information, is there any, like, I know, secondments and those practical tips of speaking to your commercial colleagues if you're in-house, or was there any other additional learnings that you took, any practical courses or anything like that you found useful?
I did some corporate finance courses, valuation courses. I think, you should try and read the FT, you should try and read the Economist, you should try, all those sorts of things that we don't necessarily haven't always had time to do, but read around your subject. You're not just a lawyer. This is particularly for in-house lawyers. You're not just the lawyer in the room. You need to be much more rounded as a business advisor. You want to be an effective business partner, and if you want people to kind of take you seriously, you need to engage with them on the same level. And
it's having those interactions that you can call upon, and people in your network, and keeping close to them to get the information from them. And then so how long did you spend in the banking space?
So I was at JPM. I was there for about 6 years, just over 6 years, and then I moved into a regulatory compliance role, which is a completely different kettle of fish, at Nomura, the Japanese bank. So I was heading up the investment banking compliance team, right? And that was kind of that was quite a tough job, actually. I mean, it was really great because it gave me management experience, which I hadn't had before. So I was kind of managing a small team, interfacing with the kind of senior management, being the sort of risk advisor. But being a compliance person in a bank is not, I have to say, much fun.
Not everyone's favorite.
No, you're not. But it kind of, I think that the thing for me that was helpful was that the people that I was dealing with, I knew what they were trying to achieve, and they knew that I knew because I'd been doing what they were, I've been doing their job. Right. So you could have that conversation. So when you talk about conflicts of interest, it's like, I understand what you're trying to achieve because, I've done that myself. Yeah. So it's I've probably got an easier ride than maybe a lot of compliance people do. Yeah. Maybe it's probably better now, but when I was doing it, it was a bit more Wild West.
Right. You can't bullshit a bullshitter.
Yes, well, exactly. Exactly. Fair. I see you.
Yeah, I see you. I know what you're doing. Nice. So became the police there. Exactly. And what was the culture? What was that like, going from US bank to a Japanese? It must have been was there a culture shift in that?
Very much so. Yeah, I mean, the Japanese work in a very different way, and it's. I think it's quite important, actually, in any environment you go. You need to understand the culture, particularly in an international company. There's always going to be an overriding culture, whether it, purely international. It's pretty unlikely, although I would probably say that all companies are a bit like that. But generally, if you've got the head office somewhere, then that will kind of affect the culture of the whole organization. And I think, so we had a lot of Japanese colleagues in London. And they obviously have a different, it's a very different culture in Japan. It's a lovely place to go. Very nice colleagues, but they sort of operate in a different way. It's much more sort of reaching consensus outside of a meeting. And actually making sure that you kind of brought everyone along with you, and not having, as I say, not having that confrontation. Yeah.
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah, I've heard similar from other guests on the podcast, but also from dealings over the years. It's different, but I think that's part of the interesting piece, right? But amalgamating those different the culture map and working together. Did you have a karaoke, a traditional karaoke initiation? What was your song? Give us a few lines, please.
No. I did have to do a karaoke. It was horrendous. I can't remember. I picked something. I can't remember what it was, but it was just the wrong key.
Okay.
You know, and you settle this on.
Sure.
This is a really long song now. I'm going to get to the end of it with my dignity intact.
Okay. Yeah. You have to have a couple of go-tos that you know.
Now I know that, but back then.
Yeah. Because I've heard that it's just huge that being able to bear yourself in that way in front of colleagues is like a thumbs up from in their culture.
And even when you're terrible, they were really supportive.
Yeah.
Your terrible efforts. You get a nice and polite round of applause at the end.
Nice. Oh, cool. And like now in your position, again back to the lesson, but that finance eye and looking at numbers, how much of that bleeds into the role of the GC, or is it is it more of an appreciation of, I know the background to this stuff?
I think you need it more as the kind of a member in the exec team.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to contribute in that forum.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously you're there as the general counsel, you are, advising on legal risk, but that's not, you don't want to sit in an exec meeting that's, you don't say anything because there were no legal points came up.
Yeah.
So you need to understand, what are the flash numbers saying?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, you need to have a basic understanding of kind of valuation
mm-hmm.
and kind of what's driving the share price. And I mean, it's all kind of stuff that you glean along the way,
mm-hmm.
but it's really important that you understand those things. Because your close colleagues are the people in the finance team. They're
mm-hmm.
almost like in-house, they're kind of like your cousins
mm-hmm.
in terms of group function.
Right.
And you work most closely with them. And so you need to understand what's the treasury team doing? What's the kind of the controller team doing? What's kind of, what's the kind of key, why do we need to repatriate cash from
mm-hmm.
X, Y, Z subsidiaries.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to pay the dividend? It's all kind of, it's just stuff. You just need to understand how corporate structures work.
Yeah, and the mechanics. Right. Cool. We'll move on to lesson 2.
Right. Yes. Have an opinion and speak human.
Okay.
So I think
in an AI company, that's saying something. It's off brand.
Well, it's very important that we stress that you need a human in the loop all the time, alongside to partner with the technology. But so I think with this one, you're a business advisor,
mm-hmm.
so you can't just show up and you see this quite often with junior lawyers. And I've seen, kind of all through my career, and I probably was guilty of this myself in the past, where you basically present a range of options, and it's like, you decide,
mm-hmm.
or and you really need to, I think, show up and kind of say, I think we should do this.
Mm-hmm.
The other options are to do this, and this, but my advice is to do this. You have to have a conclusion. You have to have a punchline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't just send a long email. And you said this is what you do see with junior lawyers quite often, not in my team obviously, but in the past, that there's a very long detailed analysis
mm-hmm.
of a particular issue
mm-hmm.
with a range of options, but no advice at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's kind of, well, here are the things, but you decide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to back yourself as a lawyer.
Mm.
You've thought it through.
Yeah.
You know what you think is the most reasonable position.
Mm-hmm.
Say it. That's what people want you to, show up and have a view.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't just always, dump. It's almost like you're dumping your problems on people, because it's dressed up as being helpful, but actually you're presenting someone who's not a lawyer
mm-hmm.
with a range of options that they possibly don't really understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're kind of paid to have a view.
Yeah.
So I think, that's a key part of being a general counsel.
So when did you, it was interesting because I was having a similar conversation about junior recruiters yesterday, and been like, when did I start to feel confident just to speak my mind in a meeting or with a candidate or a client? And it's like, when did you start, or when did that switch flick for you that you felt confident to give an opinion, or has it always been there?
No. I mean, but it was probably when I was in bank, my first role in banking, and I think I was so I remember this episode. So I was asked to produce an analysis or do some research on potential M&A targets in a particular sector. And, having been a good lawyer, and, I knew how to do my research. And so I kind of, listed a whole range of companies, or there's a handful of companies, and I did my research on them, and I kind of presented it back in the day, it was hard copy in a binder.
Okay.
And I, to the MD, and I never remember the kind of the feedback I got. He just like threw it back across the desk.
Right.
Again, this is in the open plan.
Uh-huh.
And it's and basically said, this is just a pile of raw data. What's the point of this?
Uh-huh.
And I suppose in that hierarchical kind of law firm environment, I'd kind of been used to, well, this is just the task that you've been asked to do. You don't need to then kind of draw any conclusions, or I suppose I wasn't confident to kind of provide any kind of guidance. And it was quite a shock having been given that feedback and thinking I'd done a really good job because the research was very thorough.
Yeah.
But not actually taking it a step further. And it's like, well, what do you think? And that's, I suppose it was that sort of shock. So this is what I'm kind of coming back to the first lesson, which is kind of those times outside of law are really valuable, because in the commercial world, people don't have time
to read it all. Yeah.
Make
to be the ones making the decision when they're looking for the expert to make the decision. But yeah, I suppose legal training in a way, and as a service provider, right? You're sometimes the mindset, I think, is to, so black letter law, and then it's not our job to make the decision in private practice. But I think more and more, definitely, if what I see is, and when I speak to clients and people in my network about what they look for in external lawyers, it is like they want a business partner, effectively, that's outsourced. And they want an opinion. I
think the best partners at the law firms are the ones that actually, they do give you a clear steer.
Yeah.
Particularly risk-based decisions where something's a judgment call, it's actually, if we do this or not, I think it's okay. And that's so valuable. If you've got a partner at a well-known law firm saying, I think it's okay, you're not going to go too far wrong, and certainly your board's going to be okay with with the decision as well.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to nail the colours to the mast. And I think that certainly in a corporate environment, the lawyer is the least likely person to be shooting from the hip in terms of, just because of your training, you kind of will have done all the reading and research. So it will be a well thought through piece of advice, and you should be there to back yourself.
Yeah.
You may not always, you may be overruled because of other things going on or a strategic kind of, priority. But people want you to show up. They want you there at the table. They want to have that voice. Kind of, you want a range of voices around the room. So you've got to be there and kind of think, well, look, I've thought it through. This is my advice to you. And I think that really kind of differentiates. Yeah. You see that in kind of junior lawyers. They're the ones that go that little bit extra, or the extra mile, and the ones that are a bit more hesitant.
Yeah. So now, present day, if you were sat there like that guy that you presented the raw data to, and you get that from someone in your team, your team don't do that, would you spray it across the room? What feedback would you give them to try and shift that mentality?
Yeah, I suppose it's actually in the setting of the task in the first place.
Yeah.
But I hesitate to do that because you don't want to micromanage. You don't want to kind of tell people how to do something. I think sometimes the best results are when people come up with their own kind of solutions. But I think it's being, okay, I want to hear what you think. I suppose you just, I mean, if that happened, yeah, maybe it would have been nicer if he'd taken me aside to give me the feedback in private and not across the room. But I mean, the thing is, sometimes the hard lessons are the ones you actually
Completely, yeah.
you learn from the best.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, I never did that again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't want to feel that. Don't want to feel that way again. And then just dipping back again into the career path. So banker, and then into the compliance team within Nomura. When did you get? What happened next? When did you get back into law, and what drove that?
So I think I never wanted to be a long-term. I realised I never wanted to be a long-term compliance officer, and I kind of felt like I had reached a bit of a career cul-de-sac, and I wasn't really sure kind of what to do, whether I should get back into banking, should I get into law, should I, what. So I actually took a sabbatical and ended up going to wine,
Right.
the world of wine, for a couple
Compliance
of years.
leads you to the bottle.
Well, yes, effectively, yes, effectively.
Okay.
So it was. I kind of did. It was one of those things. I took a sabbatical. So you do the normal things that you do in those sorts of situations, and you go and play some more sports. I played more tennis, and I learned Spanish, and I started wine tasting. And
Nice.
but then I discovered I was actually very good at wine tasting.
Okay.
So I did all my WSET trade exams.
Okay.
And I had a little blog at the time, and I worked for the Institute of Masters of Wine. I did a little stage in the Waitrose buying team, and I worked with a wine writer and worked in some of the wine competitions. So
Cool.
yeah,
Nice.
and then I ran out of money.
All right.
and fell back on my mum's advice, which is you always need a professional qualification. You always have it there to fall back on.
Right.
And she was right.
She was right. Okay.
And so I started doing some writing work, sort of freelance for LexisNexis at the time,
Okay.
just on kind of regulatory stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a maternity cover role, PSL role.
Right.
This is while I was doing my wine studies.
Okay.
And then I knew I didn't want to be a PSL. I knew I was I kind of that whole kind of the commercial background that I had and the legal kind of training that I had. I knew that should lead kind of somewhere, probably more in the in-house environment. And I suppose I flexed my kind of network and which you have to do when you're kind of, I mean, you'll know this.
Yeah, totally.
You can't just rely on recruitment.
No,
people.
Definitely can't. They're
Obviously,
useless.
Very, very helpful, but sometimes your network is helpful as well.
Yeah.
So, I just kind of let various people know that I was interested in going house, and if people had heard of a particular role, to let me know. So an opportunity came up at Hikma Pharmaceuticals, which is a FTSE 100 company. In the legal team, working in the London office. So it's a Jordanian company, but a listing in London.
Yeah.
And I joined and absolutely loved it. I was there for 6 years.
Nice.
Brilliant company to be at.
Yeah, I think that was when we first crossed paths briefly.
Exactly.
But at that point in time, and like that network. So again, I hear more and more, and particularly at a particular level, like your job's in someone else's network, and it's not advertised, like the exec level and GC leadership type roles. What sort of people did you network with, and at that stage, who did you tap into?
It was, I suppose, it's sort of senior leaders that I dealt with in banking, so particularly at JP Morgan Cazenove, so people that I'd worked with there. Or people that had left there, or law firm partners. Yeah, I mean, you have to be a bit brazen, and it doesn't come naturally. It's not one of those, you kind of hesitate. Well, maybe some people find it easier. I just find it a bit awkward, because you're really, you're sending that email, and it's kind of, it's a bit pushy.
Were you good at maintaining those relationships, like before you had to call on those favors? Like, had you nurtured them over the years?
Not knowingly, only kind of as actually you get on with people, so you naturally stay in touch with them. I mean, I think it's probably, maybe some advice for more junior people is actually make a point of nurturing those relationships, because you never know.
Yeah.
but I didn't do that. So I suppose it was kind of, luck and opportunity as well. But I think that is something that, we could all do more of. And some people are better than that than others. And it's all like your LinkedIn profile and kind of.
Yeah, I think that gives scale and stuff nowadays, and it's slightly different opportunity to scale a network and connections, and some of it's quite surface level, I think, as well. But like those one-to-one engagements that you have over the years and keeping in touch with alumni, and I don't know if it's a lawyer thing or I just think it's something that, like, being interested in the person that you're sat opposite and dealing with on a deal or whatever, then those, you never know what's going to happen in the next 10 years where your paths might cross. So being a little bit deliberate in keeping in touch with people. And for me, I was always quite focused on that. I didn't really want to be a lawyer. When I was working as an earlier lawyer, I wasn't that interested in the subject matter that I found that I was advising on, or that excited by it. But the partner relationships that I could see, I was like, I'd like to do a bit more of that. So it was always something that I heavily invested in trying to upskill in, or just be I just wanted to skip out being doing the law, basically. It doesn't work like that though. It doesn't work like that after I had after I had treaded water for a few years in private practice. But ultimately by doing that and flexing that muscle, right? It's just like training. It's a different skill set. So I think everyone, and it's not legal in particular, but just having your degrees of connection and like making sure that they seem like someone that's going to go far, and hoping that somebody sees that in you as well. I think it's really valuable advice.
Also, I think people don't mind. I think actually people like it if you ask for help.
Definitely.
I think if you've got a good relationship with someone, then actually it's actually quite flattering to be asked. Could you help me? Could you give me some guidance? Have you got any ideas?
Yeah.
I think people. I mean, it's if people ever ask me, it's kind of you want to give back actually.
Yeah. It's human nature, isn't it? It's like it's the psychology of it. I'm not sure, but for us as well, like as recruiters, the best relationships from our side are built around like that person. So like referrals, asking someone for referrals. It's make someone feel like their opinions relevant in their market, and they're someone that stands out. So I agree. Cool. And then we'll so the wine the wine we're in Brewdog's podcast studio, so we're
I haven't seen
it's not quite wine o'clock yet. I don't imagine it's up to much, but if their beer's anything to go by, but the like what that qualification gave you, what is it? What do you come out the back of that with?
Well, I got the WSET diploma, and I got the highest mark in the world.
Right.
Oh wow! For my year, I say I could have gone and been a sommelier or something like that.
Okay.
Worked in wine. I mean, I think it was if I'd done it straight out of university. Then it would, but I think coming to it when you've been in the city and you're living in London, and everybody I met in wine was like, "Why are you doing this? Right. You should go back into law, go back into finance, and you can afford the wine that you want to drink." Right. Okay. So it was I'm still very passionate about wine. I love visiting wine regions. I love tastings and finding new wines and stuff, but. It's kind of nice to have it as a hobby. It's quite hard to make a good living out of it.
Is there no side hustle at the moment on the wine?
Not at the moment, no. The blog died a death, I'm afraid.
It was this pre-social media, and
yeah.
Have you seen the guy that did the marathon, like the London Marathon?
Oh no,
was drinking he's a sommelier. I don't know if he is. I don't know how qualified, or if he's he probably hasn't taken your crown as the highest scoring. But he was at every mile marker who was, I mean, he was like downing a glass of wine, I
Oh
think,
my God.
or tasting a wine and then identifying it, identifying the wine.
But that's the thing. You've got to do something that makes you stand out, right?
Yeah.
Gets your name known. I mean, you've remembered him.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. I don't remember his name,
Well,
but I could picture him if I would recognise him if he walked. I think if he walked past me in the street. But
I think there's a marathon in Bordeaux. I think the Merlot one.
Okay.
It's kind of like a kind of just a glorified pub crawl.
Right.
I can see with
Yeah.
a bit of running. In
Okay,
between, so.
nice. Cool. We'll jump into lesson 3.
So I have to say I've taken lesson 3 from Barack Obama, I'm afraid.
That's all good.
So it was about taking ownership. And so I saw on YouTube recently an interview with him, and he was talking about, advice that he would give to people starting out.
Right.
And he basically said, learn how to get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be the person that says, let me take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think speaking as a manager, and also obviously reporting to, senior management, you want to be, it's just music to your ears. If someone can actually take ownership of a problem, I mean, it sort of comes back to the point about, kind of giving all the analysis and leaving it there. It's actually, no, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna own it. Obviously, you can't own every decision in an organization, but this, it's just an attitude, I think.
Yeah. And do you think is that something that lawyers, in your experience, do naturally, or no?
No, I think it's quite rare. I don't know why. I think it's maybe a sort of hesitance of I don't want to kind of overreach, stay in your lane. But honestly, it's so nice when someone in your team just kind of like, don't worry, I'll take care of that for you. You don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
Because there's just lots of admin-y stuff, or just I don't know, getting decisions out of different departments, or kind of liaising with, it's just all that kind of headache, and then inevitably some tech issue or something. It's just like somebody that goes, don't worry about it. I know it's really tedious. I'll do this.
Yeah.
It's kind of, and also I know that for my boss, so there are probably things that he thinks are very tedious, and it's kind of, if I can say, it's all right, I'll do this.
Yeah. And you don't want to delegate. You don't want to have to specifically delegate the task. It's like someone that just owns it and takes ownership.
It's initiative.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's I think you get asked all the time how I do anyway. How do people make that move into a non-legal role, or how do you expand the role of a lawyer? Or there's always the common discussion point at legal events and legal conferences about how do you get a seat at the table and elevating your position. And I think that's one of the key things, like taking stuff that isn't necessarily legal and just grabbing it and finding the solution.
Well, I think you end up doing all sorts of things you never thought you'd be involved in. So health and safety, insurance, pension scheme stuff, charitable foundation, ESG. You just get a lot thrown, that you don't really necessarily, it's not your sweet spot, it's not your area of expertise, but you have to kind of start with the kind of premise of, how hard can it be, right? I'm kind of well trained, I can reason things through, I'm sure I can read around the subject or get advice where I need it. And I think it's kind of makes it all more interesting. The more things that you're doing, or you've got oversight of, the more you've got to say in the kind of in the kind of management meetings and stuff.
Yeah, and gives you that. It takes you back to lesson 1 as well, with the other stuff outside of the legal lens. Because I see all the time, like, why are lawyers not, or why is the general counsel to CEO not a move you see happening very often? You're like, well, if you're in a box of being, and that's what all you're advising on, then you're not enriching your skill set that does anything to align it with being a CEO. So it's just stuff extra, right?
I think it's a different mindset, though. I think when you're a lawyer, I think you come at it from the risk point of view, or what could go wrong. How can we stop things going wrong? How can we manage it if it goes wrong? How can we protect the company? Whereas if you're, the kind of pure CEO is, how do we grow? How do we take risk to, to facilitate what we're trying to do? So there's kind of more, there's a sort of mindset which is a bit, it's like you're coming at it from a different point of view. Yeah.
But then you have CFOs that move into CEO roles. Why is that? Why do you think that's different?
Not all of them. Depends.
But it's a more common. It
Yeah.
is a more common route.
I think maybe you'll say there's a kind of it comes back to this point about being kind of familiar with the numbers a bit more, about the drivers of the business. Yeah, I you know, I'm not really sort of sure exactly what in my own. I don't have particular aspirations to be CEO.
Yeah, it's
I quite like the role that I have.
yeah. So I'm asking guests their own podcast recommendations. Do you are you a podcast listener yourself?
This is very mainstream. I'm obsessed with The Rest Is History.
Yeah.
I love it. I love Dominic and Tom.
Okay.
And I've been to some of their live events.
Oh, wow.
And I just listened to it in the car. I love it. It's just I always loved history, but it's just the curriculum at schools are going to be quite narrow.
Yeah.
Just sort of areas, like the 100 Years' War, or the assassination of JFK, or 1974 in the UK, or it's just kind of like just stuff. And I think they're in the Vikings at the moment, running up to 1066.
Oh, really?
And it's kind of, just I just love and then they're because there's quite a nice banter between them.
They're good at. I do on car journeys and holidays and stuff. I've listened to a few of them. There's so many in their back catalogue. It's trying to find the new stuff that you don't know about, but you sometimes gravitate towards stuff that at least notionally could follow some sort of chronological order in my head anyway. But yeah, I think it's great. That Rest is like the whole series of everywhere. It's everywhere at the moment.
Rest Is Entertainment is good as well. So that's Richard Osman and Marina Hyde, and that's quite insightful as well. Actually,
it's Gary Lineker, I think, that's behind the
Goal Hanger, isn't it?
Yeah. What are the live events like? What's the vibe?
It was a strange crowd.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, it's not the coolest crowd.
Like a legal event.
Basically, like the GC conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, they're quite jolly. It was quite jolly, but it's just the kind of. I think the last one I went to was last summer at Hampton Court.
Okay.
And they did the one about the Tudors and beheadings.
Right.
So it was quite light-hearted. But it was good.
Good. Nice. Well, thank you for sharing your lessons. Those were great, and the career path is really it's non-linear, as you said, but it's got you to that stage, and in an amazing role, and something that's aspirational for people. So it's really inspiring to hear how it's not a one-track path.
You've got to take the opportunities when they present themselves. I think that's really important, and kind of go with your heart.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. Nice.
What feels right at the time, and it'll all come right in the end.
Yeah. Hopefully. Cool. All right. Well, thank you, and we'll wrap up there.
All right. Thanks.
Cheers.
So that wraps up another episode of Lessons I Learned in Law, powered by Harriet Brown in-house legal recruitment. Now, I share these stories each week to help lawyers of all levels, and both in private practice or working in-house. And it doesn't matter if you're early in your career or you're already leading a team. Learning from your peers or from those who have walked in your shoes before, then this is the show for you. If you find it useful, I would love it if you could share it with your colleagues or share it with your network, or drop us a message just to let us know that you're listening and that you're out there. Feedback really helps us grow the show and take it in the direction that gives the most value to you, our listeners. So until next time, I've been Scott Brown. Thank you.